Welcome, everybody, back to Rico 12. I'm Justin B., your host, and a stumbling, bumbling, beautifully imperfect child of an all-powerful and perfectly loving God, and an addict living in the miracle of recovery one day at a time. Rico 12 is an open to all addictions and afflictions organization dedicated to exploring the common threads of the differing manifestations of alcoholism, sharing tools and offering hope from those walking a similar path. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, and locations to learn and support one another. Our speakers come from various fellowships and experiences, demonstrating the universal principles of recovery. Rico 12 is not allied or affiliated with any specific 12-step fellowship. This is Rico 12 speaker meeting number 391. Thank you for joining us live or on the recording later. And today's speaker is Sheryl A., who previously spoke to us back in August of 2024, a little over a year ago. Her talk today is entitled A New Way of Living. I look forward to hearing more about this message in a few minutes, but first, a few quick notes and announcements. We do offer a variety of recovery resources, including other podcasts and social media communities. To learn more, you can check out the chat that I'll hear in the live meeting or in the show notes of the podcast for links. And also one more note, for those who were wanting to attend live last week and did not find a room open, I apologize sincerely for that. Life is unmanageable, and that was a manifestation of the unmanageability of life and me trying to manage things myself. And man, it's been an adventure, but I'm grateful to be back today. And then also, one more thing, Rico 12 is self-supporting, and your contributions help us continue this mission. Thank you to all our Spearhead donors, past and present. This last couple of weeks, a special thanks goes to Alessia, Nigel, and Abigail as Spearhead donors. Thank you so much. If you out there feel your higher power nudging you to make a contribution, whether it be financial, whether it be word of mouth, sharing it with your fellowship, sharing it with your sponsees, please feel free to do so. And you can do that with links or just by saying things using word of mouth. Your support, both financially and word of mouth, truly makes a difference in helping us share these messages of hope and recovery. Each week, we receive light and inspiration from our speakers. Their experience brings hope, meaning, worth, and growth to us as listeners. Now I want to welcome today's guest speaker, Sheryl A. Here's a little bit about her before I turn the floor over to her. Sheryl A. had a spiritual experience on May 12th of 2022 through working the 12-step program outlined in the Big Book of AA. Since then, Sheryl has been journeying in recovery from food addiction and codependency through a spiritual solution that has set her free. She will talk about a new way of living beyond mere abstinence as she shares her experience, strength, and hope. Take it away, Sheryl. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Justin. It's great to be here. Thanks, everyone, for showing up and for those who are listening. I'm going to share really briefly about why I'm here, but I really want to get into the meat and potatoes of what it is to have a new way of living in recovery. I entered the rooms of Overeaters Anonymous over 4 years ago, and it took me about 6 months to find someone who could help me. And when they did, I was pretty desperate. I was convinced that my life was unmanageable. I could see how food was not the problem. Food was a solution to my problems. And I had run out of any ideas that anyone else had to offer or that I had to offer that I was willing to try. So when somebody offered to take me through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps, all I knew was I wanted what they had. And what they had was what had led me into the rooms at the beginning, which was they had freedom. And I first heard about this concept of freedom, a new way of living, a month before I entered OA with a friend of mine at the time who I did not know was an alcoholic. And the pandemic had hit, and they ended up discovering when they weren't drinking socially, they couldn't stop drinking. And they went to a 12-step program, found a sponsor, did the 12 steps, stopped drinking. And I bumped into them a year into that. And they had always been nice, but they had never been happy, trudging through life. And when I bumped into them, we're in the pandemic, everybody's suffering, everybody's struggling. And this person is an ear to ear grin, and they're just full of life and joy. And I just said, how are you doing? Because you seem like you're doing great. And they said they found that they were an alcoholic and they found this new way of living. And it had really set them free. And they had, despite circumstances, were full of joy. And the circumstances were they had lost their job because it shut down in the pandemic. When they stopped drinking, they lost all their friends. They lost their girlfriend. She kicked them out. They were couch surfing. So significant circumstances. And they're like, isn't life good? And when they explained what the freedom was, it was that they no longer craved the alcohol, that the craving had been removed and they'd been restored to sanity. And that's what led me into the OA rooms, because I thought that's what I want. I don't want to, I'd spent my life trying to deal with my weight, trying to deal with how I felt about, how people perceive me. And there was something deep in their message that resonated with me that said, wow, to first of all be free of cravings, to not be fighting it, because that's all I'd done. I was exhausted with all the effort I did to control and manage the food. To be free of that was extremely motivating. But the other part that went deeper was to have serenity in all my affairs. That was well, if I don't get disturbed, then I'm not going to want to eat. I could see that because I began to see how I ate because I was disturbed. So then the same message that took me 6 months to find in the rooms was when somebody spoke, and she was a compulsive eater like me, and she said the same thing. She said through doing these 12 steps in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, she, a compulsive eater, had been set free from the cravings of the food, and she no longer compulsively ate. She had been restored to sanity. She had neutrality. She didn't need to hide the food. She didn't need to throw out the food. She didn't need to avoid the food, control the food. That she only ate when she was hungry. She didn't want to eat when she wasn't hungry. There weren't rules around it. There weren't restrictions. It was really sane. And the sanity also was she's not winging it either, right? Because I wanted that insanity of, can't I just wing it? So I began to accept that maybe I didn't even know what sane was. So then when she spoke and talked about also going through some circumstances in her life that were really hard, and how she wasn't turning to the food or anything else, because I could turn to any addiction. I mean, probably higher up on the list than even food was people. People were a big addiction for me, specifically people where I could get approval, love, a connection. I couldn't have a single thing happen in my day without calling somebody to tell them about it. How much I sought out people and talked about people and looked for validation from people was my first drug. So when she talked about, not only was she free from the cravings, but she was free in all of her affairs. She sounded like my friend, and she had something about her, a lightness to her that I wanted. And so I reached out. She offered to be available to sponsor. And I cannot emphasize how important it is for anyone who has a solution to be reaching out, because we are dying in these rooms, and we are misguided if we think that to walk around with a solution to our cancer and not be seeking out people to help is going to work, right? So I'm really grateful that she first of all said, if anyone wants what I have, I'm available to help you. And that she had surrendered enough of her life that she had that availability because I needed it. And nobody's going to take up more time than somebody you're taking through the steps. So thank you, God, for every person in my life who had surrendered enough of their will that they had the time for me. And she was the first, and she explained really what I needed to hear. That there was no point in applying any tools or rules until I was free from the inside out. And that really stuck with me because I could see in the big book, the same as I saw in the compulsive eating diet programs and other ways, that we were always trying to control our behaviors. So we're trying to move from the outside in. And what I really needed was to be healed from the inside out. And then once I was planted, internally on new soil, then my behaviors would flow from that. And then anything I needed, I would be able to do because that spirit of strength would flow through me. And that was a new concept. And it should not have been a new concept because I was born and raised in the church. My father was a minister. But that I began to analyze that in my 20s and realized that I had a concept of God that was basically what I was born into. And I ended up in a marriage that wasn't working with a guy in the church that I should have worked with. And there was some feelings of betrayal. And then I just began to go, well, have I built my relationship with God on a poor foundation? Have I been using mortar that's made made with sand, right? Is it like crumbling? And I was like, why do I believe what I believe? And this was in my 20s. So I think I've observed God, whoever we understand as God, this spiritual power is constantly in our lives, nudging us toward them. And I think that was a nudge. And I began to consider, well, if the only reason I believe this is because I was born and raised in it, that's a weak foundation. And if I have held on to a belief that's geographic, like, am I so lucky that I live in North America? This is in Canada, born into a family that knows the right way to God. I began to think, okay, wait. Like, if God is limited to a geographic location, that doesn't seem all that powerful. So I was already beginning to question some of my ideas. Like, if I was born in this country, like, then I wouldn't know God. Is God that limited? Right? It doesn't seem like that's God. And that was just for me. That was what I was unpacking based on how I was raised and trying to figure out my path. So I made a beginning there, but that's as far as I went. And when I came into the rooms, by then I'd ended up fairly agnostic. I was sort of done with organized religion. I saw its value. In fact, I was on a piano circuit with the churches in our city. I'd go to the Pentecostal church this week and play for them, and the Baptist church that week and play for them. And I had a whole circuit, the Unitarian. So I wasn't turning away from religion, but I just felt like it's not whatever it was offering me. I was on the same roller coaster that I was with the food. Right? I was up and I was down and I was derailed. And so coming into the rooms, I was more agnostic. I had remarried and my husband was agnostic, and I consider a very spiritual being. And I like this idea of spirituality, but that's as far as I really had gotten. When my sponsor took me through the steps and she said, this is a spiritual program. It is not an abstinence program. It is not a sobriety program. It is a spiritual program. It is not a knowledge program. You are not going to learn about the steps. You are going to do the steps. And what she said we were trying to do is trying to get me connected to this power, this spiritual being that was my malady. What the big book says is the spiritual malady is actually what I'm struggling with. That appealed to me because, first of all, I thought, thank you that you are not telling me to do anything with the food, because I truly am powerless over the food. I can't do it even if I want to. That's why I'm here. Right? So thank you that you're not telling me to do anything with the food or my food behaviors, because I can't. Thank you that you're not telling me that I have to do anything with my relationships, because I've been in 15 years of wonderful couples counseling, personal counseling, and I can do it for a while, but I can't sustain it. So that I didn't have to do anything with my behaviors. I just was going to have to find a God of my understanding. And that appealed to me. And so that is what we did. And we did them quickly because I just did it. Right. So the quickly sounds like we rushed, But that's only if we think about it as learning. And I didn't need to learn more. I learned enough. So it was quickly was, I want you to go and write down like all the people that you carry around inside you that bug you and all the fears you have and all the ways you've harmed others. And I just went that day and did it. And then the next day, okay, well, let's look at why that is. Let's reframe it. And I did it. And then let's look at people you've harmed and make amends. And I did it. So it was only as quick as I was willing to go. And the speed of it was the doing of it. And that transformed my life. And that was just a beginning. And so when I finished those steps, I didn't have to be like, now you're going to go tell others. I wanted to go and tell others. I wanted to tell it on the mountains. I was not going, oh, well, they'll be attracted to me. It's attraction, not promotion. I was done with my own, like that kind of commentary of me just trying to get out of things I don't want to do. I wanted to tell people. I still needed guidance on how to do that so that I was useful because I wanted to be useful. But I have to say, these 12-step rooms have been what a gift. Thank you, God, for all the people that came before me that put together these rooms where people are coming who are asking for help. Like I can just go there and say, I can help. And here's why I can do that. Because I had nothing to offer except God. And it was and it wasn't even my God. It was a God of their understanding. I had nothing to offer from me. And what really helped me with that was when I was reading Bill W.'s story in chapter 1 of the big book. And he began to seek out a power greater than himself and had this spiritual experience while he's in this hospital from his last binge. He wasn't thinking, well, like, will this help me stop drinking? He's seeking out this spiritual experience because of something he'd seen he wanted, like I saw with these other people that I wanted. And then the alcohol problem disappeared. And that was my experience as I was seeking out this spiritual way of living, this rigorous honesty and cleaning out all the stuff that had built up and surrendering it. The cravings just went away. I felt like Bill W. when he's like, little did I know this would be the last time I ever drank. There was no plan. I just was like, little did I know that on May 12th, 2022, that would be the last time I compulsively ate, or that I would say I've had a few challenges there, but that feeling of surrendering the compulsive eating really happened there, like where I no longer wanted to compulsively eat, and I could just surrender that. It was gone. So then once I had that, I felt also like Bill, like here I am at that time, I'm probably still like 70 pounds overweight. I've got nothing to offer that the world wants, right? Bill W. leaves the hospital. He's trying to talk to, drunks in the ditches. He's got nothing to offer. He didn't work for another year and a half. He had ill health. He was still struggling with depression and self-pity. And I related to that. My life was not together. The weight didn't just fall off. That is not what happened. And I began to grow in understanding about what this way of living is. That the things that I thought were important, they don't matter. And there's this verse I read recently, and it says, man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And I thought, and I'm going to be honest, sometimes I have struggled with envy when I've seen over the last 3.5 years, people who have lost all the weight, and I'm still like, oh, I'm kind of maybe lose a pound or two, maintain for a year. And yes, sometimes it's painful when I've been judged for that, but it's probably no different than how it was for Bill W. There were probably people doing the same. Well, if you really have a spiritual experience, how come you can't find work? How come you're still struggling with depression? How come you are still, struggling with your physical health? And that is not what this program is about. Those are the measurements of the world. And God has used people in recovery much longer and much stronger than me to slowly change my thinking. And here I'm going to share, this is going to be my pet share. Here are two situations that I began to understand this new way of living, or to grow in it. I'd been growing in surrendering all my affairs and practicing these principles and living in this freedom from the compulsive eating, and actually experiencing freedom from just approval seeking and attention seeking. And, and that's a whole lifetime thing. I am sure there are people in my life now that are like, girl, you got a long way to go. And they are probably right. But to see the change that has come upon me without any effort on my part, to me, it's always a miracle. So I was about, I want to say 2 years into recovery, and I practice it every day. I was very, very sick, and I will fall very quickly back into my sickness. Ask anyone I sponsor. They've seen me fall into my defects, right? And so I don't get any days off. And that's just my journey. Some people might, but I don't. I live in steps 10, 11, and 12 every day. And so I was doing that, and I'd come out of some trials where I'd gotten a little bit shaken up and felt I'd lost my footing a bit. And I'd run back to my sponsor and said, I'm not sure what's going on. And they helped guide me right back into the arms of my higher power. So I could just, build a stronger foundation and maybe take off a little bit of that, rebuild that foundation that had gotten weak, and start building a stronger foundation. That's okay, right? That's just progress. And I had, our cat had gotten sick, and she'd been with us for 10 years in the neighborhood. We live in this little neighborhood, about 35 houses. And we'd lived there since my daughter was born. So at that time, it would have been 17 years, 18 years, I guess. And she got sick, and we went to the vet, and they said, well, she's got cancer. She's got about a week to live. And she was a really wonderful mouser. And our neighbors next to us loved her. They said, they had a beautiful, master garden, won awards every year. So they were so grateful she got rid of all the mice that, wreck things. And so, I'd said to my daughters, why don't you go and let our neighbors know that when she's going to pass, we're going to have somebody come to the home, and they can come say their goodbyes, because they really loved her. So my daughters went to that house, and they said, oh, well, let the next door neighbor know as well, because the kids liked her. And the next door neighbor said, well, you might want to let the neighbor across the street know, because I know Mimsy went to visit them. And so my daughters just said, Mom, we're just going to go to all the homes, just because we don't know who knew her, right? And just let them know. So they went to 35 homes and left a little celebration of life note. And that day she passed away, all 35 homes, came. And what we didn't know is every morning or every night she'd head out, and she was visiting every one of our neighbors. And we had a neighbor down the street who had been there forever, and he'd gotten elderly, and he'd been shut in, and his wife came by, and she said, Fred's been a shut in for the last year. She said, except for me, the only other being she sees is Mimsy coming to his French doors every day and saying hi to him. And then another neighbor saying, she would walk on the fence and talk to us, and how much joy she spread in that neighborhood. Every single neighbor knew Mimsy. And God said, your cat is being more useful in your neighborhood than you are. And I went, oh my gosh, because I didn't know even their names, most of their names. I knew the neighbors beside me. I didn't know Fred had been a shut-in for a year. I didn't know this other neighbor had moved and their parents had moved in. And as they all came by and said the story, I just felt that how am I living my life in usefulness to God and others when I've lived here for 17 years now, and my cat knows my neighbors better than I do. And so then I began to go, okay, this is what this means. This is the thing this is how I lived before. I lived inside my little home in my little bubble with my little, friends or family. And that was part of my selfishness. And so I was like, God, I'm willing. And so I wanted to be useful to my family. And I said, I'm going to start doing some landscaping. And every day that I was out landscaping, the neighbors would come by, and I'd stop and talk with them. And then I'd ask them how they're doing, get to know them. By the end of that summer, I knew every neighbor. I knew whose mom was in the hospital. I knew who'd been sick. I knew who'd just broken their wrist. I knew who was struggling with addiction. I knew who was living in domestic abuse. I'd been in their homes. They'd been in my home. And now I'm like, oh, this is a whole new way of living. So, and God used my cat, right? Like, that's how amazing God is. And then the second part, and I'll just wrap up with that, was my dog. I had this dog that had been my running dog. And here's part of this is when you talk about spirituality for me, my self-focus, I just drown in it. I mean, it's no wonder I ate. I'm just amazed at the people in my life who've been so patiently waiting for, this new way of living for me. And so I had this running dog and they kept me safe and we were really bonded. But that's kind of in every relationship, I was the same with my dog. Like the dog went where I went and did what I wanted to do and was useful to me. And I loved them. That's how I was in relationships. They were useful to me, therefore I loved them. And she got old. And here I am in recovery and I'm resenting my dog. So I'm not going to lie. I'm doing 10 steps about my dog, feeling like an idiot, but I'm like, well, I'm resentful. I'm supposed to give it to God and talk to someone and, turn my thoughts to being useful. So then I'm like, well, how do I turn my thoughts being useful about resenting my dog because she's slow and can't run with me anymore, right? And so I thought, I could take her on longer walks. And I don't like to walk. I find walking boring. So then that's how every time I got resentful at her, I'd take her on a walk. That was how I turned my thoughts. And then I'm, really trying to grow in my awareness and effectiveness with God, to practice my daily time with God. And I'm asking God to show me how to find more time for that. And the morning walk, turned into also an evening walk. And she got slower and slower and we go less and less distance and it would take longer and longer. And all of a sudden, I just began to talk to God. And I would go on these walks and I began to look forward to them. Me and my dog were going to go talk to God. And those became these beautiful, sacred spaces where I began to get to know my Creator. I actually could pause and really get to know them. And we would go in the trails where no one could see us. And every so often someone would see us and see me talking away. Who are you talking to? Oh, just my dog. And I would do that. And she lived well beyond her years during those years. I think God just entered that space and gave her life. And she was a lab. And at 16 and a half, we finally had to make the decision that she would be suffering too much to put her down. And I was able to say, God, thank you for giving me this old dog where I got no benefit. And I began to learn how to practice usefulness to others with no gain for me. Because I don't know if I'd ever gotten to know God the way I did without her. I would thank you for bringing me this dog that showed me how to find you. And I've learned that this new way of living is every day, it's how I reframe every single thing into something beautiful and spiritual. And when that is flowing through me, I don't need to ever turn to others or to food or to social media or to TV. I'm just, without even trying, I am poured out on others. And so that's been my experience. And I didn't know that that's what this would be when I started in the 12-step program. I had no idea. I just thought it was, I need to stop eating. I had no idea that that was so much beside the point of what God intended for me. And so I hope that encourages any of you that are starting out or struggling to just really make space for a power greater than you, any power you want, a 3-headed God, 30 gods, a God that's your, nature, whatever that power is, make room for them, seek them out and find them because they have designed us. They have designed us to be useful to them, to others. And when we're in that design, it feels perfect. So that I'll pass.
Got questions about addiction, recovery, or just life in general? Let's noodle it out together. Grab your big book, a pen, a highlighter, and a notepad, and join Nikki M and me, Justin B, on Rico 12 Noodle It Out with Nikki M. Each episode, we take real-life questions, ours, yours, and those from the recovery community, and dig deep into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to find real, practical solutions. So, if you're ready to do the work and apply the solution, tune in to Noodle It Out with Nikki M, streaming now on your favorite podcast platform. What a beautiful share. Thank you so much, Sheryl. I appreciate it. And, as you were sharing, my thoughts were taken back to just 5 minutes before I opened up this recovery room today. My wife sent me a text message, a little meme, and it says, "When we recover loudly, we keep others from dying quietly." And it just rang out to me as you were sharing. I was like, oh my goodness, my higher power is trying to tell me something, to teach me something today. So this is good. Thank you for going into that. So a reminder to our live audience, if you have a question for Sheryl, please type it in the chat. If you'd like to remain anonymous, you can either direct message it to me or put anonymous at the beginning. If not, I'll just read your first name. But I've already gotten a couple of questions that have come in. We're going to start off with one from an anonymous listener here, and I'll just read it word for word for you, Sheryl. Hey, Sheryl. Wow. I love your story. I am exactly going through something like you had gone through right now. My question is, with compulsive overeating, they say there is a physical aspect of the disease as well as a spiritual. And with that, physical recovery. Would you be able to touch a little bit on physical recovery? What is the physical aspect of the disease? And did you have to follow some specific guideline, structure, routine, etc., in order to heal this aspect of the disease too? What's your grounding like with the meals, and do you even need one?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question. And I think it's relevant. I mean, it's a practical program of action, right? So I'm not chasing unicorns and rainbows and hoping it all works out, right? It's a very practical program of action. I will say I had to surrender my ideas first. So that was really what happened first, was I surrendered all my ideas. And here's what my ideas were. They were all diet ideas. They were all societal value ideas, including, in North America, thin is the ideal. But I've spent time in Brazil. I can tell you thin is not the ideal there. I've spent time in Cuba. They don't, right? So just recognize we have societal ideals of what like weight should be for it to be healthy. I think it's misleading to ever bring weight, like our size, into the equation. But I had to surrender my compulsive eating 100%, because I used the compulsive eating to fill the God-shaped vacuum. So if I'm in compulsive eating, I'm using that as a solution, and I'm going to struggle. I'm going to struggle in how I show up in life. I'm going to become avoidant. I'm usually turning to the food when I don't want to deal with the situation, or I'm overwhelmed by it, or I'm trying to figure something out. I'm in my head ruminating, and then the food calls me. So if I'm turning to my higher power, I don't turn to the food. At the same time, I'm like the alcoholic in that the alcoholic could never drink again, right? I can never compulsively eat again. And it's different for food. And there is only one small chapter that really talks about that physical malady in the big book. And it's not even in chapter 1, right? It's before that. And it's by a doctor who worked with alcoholics. So we need to just consider context. But I'm going to say that I don't get to wing it. Like that is, sane eaters, they can wing it. I don't get that luxury anymore. So I really have to surrender each day. And I have to recognize if I get too hungry, I'm going to fall into a binge. So I can't restrict. Like I can't just be like my husband who forgets to take lunch and doesn't eat all day. That will lead me into some really dangerous territory. I have to have, for me, a plan, but it changes all the time. That was what I didn't realize is it's not like a tracking plan. It's more like I've been going through perimenopause and menopause, and then I exercise. So it's like, well, today, I always like to have breakfast, but I only eat when I'm hungry and I stop when I'm not. So I don't get to eat if I'm not hungry just because it says 12 o'clock. So, right. So sometimes we get into these plan of eatings that are kind of diet mentality. And once we're getting into anything that is disregarding paying attention to God and how God has designed our bodies, we're getting into humanate thinking. So I just have to, this is why it's a daily program. Every day I have to show up and go, God, how should I nourish my body today? And I can't call foods good or bad. I just recognize that when I was having the instant oatmeal, that I was hungry within an hour. And I was like, I don't like to kind of be sort of fighting with the food in, so maybe I'll start doing slow cooked oatmeal, right? Like, and those things were really gradual. It's just so different with the compulsive eating. It's like that first month I went, God, I don't even think I know what hunger feels like. And by the time I felt hungry, I felt starving. And then I'd be like, okay, this is hunger. Then I grew in understanding. Now I have a better sense of my signals. But I'll like, do I have the groceries in the house so that I can have like surrendered sane eating, right? So that I'm, am I eating enough early in the day so that I'm not going to be, of course, I'm going to be really hungry at night if I haven't eaten enough during the day. God, please give me sanity today. So there's things that I think they're very individual. I think we live in extremes. We can either go to trying to control the food. Control will never work. It's always based in fear. Or we'll go to like, I want to just like it. Oh, yay, I'm free. Now I can do whatever I want with the food. That's not sanity either, right? We have to understand I've crossed the threshold. I can never wing it again, but I also can never fall into those controlling behaviors again. And the biggest thing is I've had to let go of the weight. That's been the hardest because I've begun to understand that's an outside issue. But that's also really allowed me to have sanity in menopause. And for God to show me I'm like, geez, God, like my weight has not changed in over a year. Right. And I still have more to lose. Right. And then to like ask God to show me the truth and to see God going, you are in the middle of menopause and you are a compulsive eater. And for the first time in your life, you're not yo-yoing. Your weight has not fluctuated in 3.5 years. Even when I've lost weight, it's been really sane. And I can maintain it through Christmases, birthdays, Easters, like that's a miracle. And to begin to go, oh yeah, like, people I know that are sane eaters, what makes them sane? I used to think because they didn't gain weight. No, it's that their weight didn't fluctuate. And then I go, oh, right. So I had to set aside my ideas about weight and what sanity looks like with weight. I hope that helps.
No, that is, I really appreciate that answer myself there, Sheryl. Thank you for going into that. We have another question from an anonymous person that I think follows into this a little bit. This person says, please ask Sheryl to speak to some of the rules and tools she talked about. So what are some of the rules and tools that you used? And I think it probably aligns into what you just shared. Hey, Spearheads, if you're looking to dive deeper into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with people who live the solution, then you won't want to miss RICO 12 Big Book Roundtable. Join David G., Nikki M., and me, the moderator Justin B., 3 recovered addicts from multiple fellowships, as we break down the big book line by line. In each 30-minute episode, we share our experience, strength, and hope in a real, raw, and practical roundtable discussion. So, if you are ready to learn and apply what you learn, tune in to RICO 12 Big Book Roundtable on your favorite podcast platform.
Okay, well, I can tell you in the room some of the rules and tools I've heard that I have found in working in my own recovery and working with others, just kind of muddy the waters, if that's helpful. One of them is journaling. And so for somebody like me who likes, part of my self-focus falls into journaling. Me writing about me, talking about me, thinking about me, somehow figuring if I can just get to what's going on in me, then I'll be okay. it has not worked for me. I actually have found that, mostly I've been asked to put down the pen and just turn my thoughts to others. Like, Sheryl, don't worry about it. Whatever's going on with me, like, my higher power knows it. They'll work it out. I can just let go that sort of need to focus on me so much. So that was one. Journaling was one. Um, and another one was going to meetings to get help. I will do that as well, because like part of my addictive way is people, connecting with people. And I'll use people to distract me. I'll use people to make me feel better. And I mean, I grew up in the church. I mean, we had, Bible studies and youth groups, and like there was all kinds of things we'd go to that would make me feel better. That concept of needing to feel better was an old idea. Like, my feelings are a gift. We're designed to have feelings, but my need to feel better is rooted in self-seeking. I don't need to feel better. In fact, the part of the reason I ate was because I didn't like feeling uncomfortable. So realizing I can just feel uncomfortable, not going to die, like that, like just that sanity. People don't always feel good, but I would go to meetings to use them to feel better. So now I only go to meetings to find somebody still suffering that I can help. And if I'm at a meeting and I cannot be helpful to someone else, I'm not at a meeting. It also means, because I'm actively sponsoring, that I just don't go to a lot of meetings. I'm only going to them when I'm like, oh, I need to find someone else to help. Oh, there's a meeting going on. So using the meetings, I think, in a self-seeking way can really happen. So those are some of the rules and tools I had to set aside. So I hope that gives some context around that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And what you shared there and what you shared earlier in your initial share brought a quote that I had heard previously to mind, and I'm gonna butcher it, but the quote is basically this: the sanity, the serenity I feel in my life has very little to do with the circumstances of my life and everything to do with the focus of my life. And you talked about, when you first came into the rooms and started getting sane, your life was falling apart still on the outside, but you still felt sanity. Talk to us a little bit more about that. What is the focus of my life that can help me trudge through the insanity that's going on, and in
Yeah.
a peaceful way?
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, wow, that's been huge. I, it's a whole new way of living, to just go, nothing, nobody around me needs to change. Nothing around me needs to change. That's not what this is about. And I encourage people to read, like, read about Buddha, read about the Prophet Muhammad, read about the stories of Jesus, like read about great spiritual leaders and how they lived. I'm sort of like, I don't understand why I was so blind, because it's really obvious that they lived for others and they really put that into action. They had a life where they went out and lived for others. And I don't think any of the great spiritual teachers, leaders of any time have felt that their circumstances were working for them. It just was so beside the point, right? And so I think there's a part of me still that struggles sometimes with, like, that hope of, like, I just hope my marriage will get better. I just hope I'll find that job that's going to be the right fit. But I do know that that's grounded in self-seeking, and so I still surrender that. So there have been, in the 3.5 years, there's been lots of hardships and challenges. To be in the midst of that and feel peace, to not lose sleep, to not need to try to fix or rescue or change, to not, I can't do boundaries. And that sounds strange, but like I took boundaries courses. I read all the books. But that's like a rule for me. And here's why: I will only use boundaries when I'm afraid. That's just what I do. So I use them to control others, to protect me. So I learned that. I'm like, so what I do each day is I'm like, God, please show me how you want me to be. No rules. I have no idea how I need to be with this person today, and I'm in a marriage. We're now 20 years in. That is a great place to practice serenity, because I've just been practicing letting go of the script and letting go of expectations for the marriage and for him. And it allows me to just show up with unconditional love, practice new ways of being that I'm still learning, that I couldn't get to on my own. I just had to let it go. So it's mostly like just let go of all the ideas of circumstances that I need to be, just call it out and say that's probably not true. I did that a lot. I went, I think I need all these social connections. God, I feel like I have less friends in recovery. And then just going, well, maybe I don't even know what I need socially. Maybe these are old ideas. Like I think constantly challenging what I thought I would need for every situation has allowed me to let go of expectations for circumstances and just be in it. An example I know, Justin, this morning was I'm supposed to be in a different city at an important interview this afternoon, and I could not find my car keys. And I need the car keys to get on the ferry, to get on the plane. Like it's the whole thing. And as it was happening, I just am like, okay, God, how do I need to be right now? And it's just like, just be chill, Sheryl, all good. And when I couldn't find them, I was like, I'm not going. That is obviously the outcome. And then okay, so what do I do now? Well, I'm going to cancel the ferry. I'll cancel the float plane. And I sent them an email and said, here's what's happened. I am not going to be at this interview. Through a series of events that started with me not being able to find my keys. And then I said the truth. To be honest, with the situation I'm in over the winter and the location I'm staying, today is possibly an indicator that it could be really difficult to do this position. And I'm wondering if we should press pause. Please let me know what you think. So that was amazing, right? What I was really doing was letting go of the belief that this is the job I need. It has to work out. Maybe that's God going, you got to have a more honest conversation with them, because this all falling apart could be an indicator that this isn't going to work ever. So now I can have a different, it just changes the focus, right? So, yeah.
Hey, Rico 12 Spearheads. If our recovery resources have helped you, please consider a donation. Your financial support, as well as your word of mouth support, keeps Rico 12 running and reaching the man who is still sick. Donate today at rico12.com/support or check the show notes for PayPal and Venmo links. Every contribution helps carry the message. Thanks for being a Rico 12 Spearhead. Yeah, it's amazing. I was actually going to ask you to share a little bit of that story that you shared with me before we started. You did it proactively. Thank you for doing that, because I think it was a perfect segue into what what we're talking about here. Now, you just said something, though, before sharing that story that I don't think I've ever heard anybody say before. You said, I can't do boundaries. I only do boundaries when I'm afraid, in order to control others to protect me.
Yeah.
Dive into that just a little bit more, because I've never heard it put that way before. In fact, I've heard it put pretty opposite to that. So I want to hear your experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think I want to acknowledge, I'm speaking for me. So I grew up in a home where I blamed my parents and everything was awful. And you know what I mean? In my sickness as an adult, my parents were the problem. My brothers were looking back, I'm going to tell you, I was in a good home. Now, there are people who have been, born and raised into homes where there has been tremendous pain and suffering, and they have been surrounded by people that will harm them at every opportunity, whether they realize it or not. When that's different, right? They might our compasses can get broken at a young age, and they might need outside help from a psychologist on how to establish boundaries, because they'll just gravitate back into these painful situations, right? So I mean, my situation's not like that. My boundaries were more, I'm not getting my way, or I don't like what they're being. So I'm going to call it toxic behavior, or I'm going to call it bullying, or, I'm going to label that person, that behavior. And I've had some people that are not in my life that I can see the truth, because I don't want to live in fantasy. I want to live in reality now. I can see that they're always going to run me over. They just are, right? But I also am learning, and it's a new thing. Those who have walked a spiritual path, um, did not, they often inserted themselves into what we would call unsafe situations. They hung out with people that were going to betray them, and they knew they were going to be betrayed. They spent time with people that they knew would harm them. So I'm just growing in that, but I'm beginning to understand at a deeper level that, like, serenity really does mean that sometimes I'm actually helpful, or I'm called into a situation where this person isn't, this is, without boundaries, it's going to be really messy. And, but that's just where I am. And I'm actually just now thinking about just where I am right now and what's going on. And I wonder if that's a good example. Right now I'm taking care of a home on a beautiful little island. The owner, she's a lovely woman. She's gone overseas back to her home for a couple months, and I've been taking care of her sweet old dog and staying here. And my husband, comes and goes, and in the course of this, it's become apparent that this home that her boyfriend has built for her, and they're older, but it's his property. He's built it for her for a variety of reasons, that she is trying to extract herself from that situation, and I'm in the middle of it. So see, old me would be like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, we need some boundaries here. Right. And I realize there's a part of, she's using me as a buffer. And then I just get to go, okay, God, how do you want me to be? Like, because now what does my fear go? My fear goes, oh my gosh, well, like, her boyfriend, he's going to get upset, and he's got this contract work that my husband's been doing, and we could lose this contract work. And I get all in the fear. And then I'm just like, this is unacceptable. And then I'm taking sides. And then I just was like, oh God, I know that you want me to be useful here. How do you want me to be? And then I'm able to say to her, hey, here's some other thing that I really believe God has brought in my path that might be helpful for you if you want to, like, use that as an option. And also, here's, like, I think for this day, I'm not going to be there. I think that it's not useful for me to be there. So I'm not going to be there. Right. So I just sort of in the moment. And then I talked with my husband, and he's like, oh, 100%. And he goes, well, we're in the middle of it now. We didn't know it. And he goes, but he said, and I think he was right. He said, I think God is going to use this for good. I think we're here for a reason. So now I'm not so worried about how I'm going to get harmed, how this could, like, turn on us. They might think we're trying to interfere and taking some. Now I'm not worried about any of that. The fear's gone. I'm like, ultimately, I'm rooting for love. I'm rooting for God's love. And however that looks, I'm here.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sheryl. And I don't remember the context of this phrase, but I wrote it down as you were sharing earlier, and I want you to go a little bit deeper on it. Maybe you can help with the context of it. Um, it's I'm no longer trying to get out of things that I don't want to do. And I look at that and I go, sometimes I see something that is in front of me that I could do, maybe that I quote unquote should do, but I don't want to. So I look for excuses to get out of it. Talk to me a little bit about I no longer try to get out of things that I don't want to do.
Yeah, that, and the big book says, we alcoholics, we addicts are an undisciplined bunch. We're an undisciplined lot, but God disciplines us in how He wants us to be. And I've taken that to heart. I have to say, I really came into these rooms very undisciplined, even though I had, like, this successful career and had raised a family and lived in a nice neighborhood. The lack of discipline was, I just don't do what I don't want to do. And that's, like, really hard for me. It's really hard for me. And if I do something I don't want to do, I'm going to try to, like, sort of get my result out of it. I'm going to try to work it to my benefit. So I had to practice putting down my will. And initially at the start, it was, I think early on I could see that self-focus, right? So what happened was I started to go, why is this bugging me? It's inconveniencing me. And as soon as I could see that, I'd be like, I need to do this because it gets me out of that selfish feeling inconvenienced. So I could see that the action was actually me surrendering the defect. So that was why I did it from the start. I think it was rarely like I should do it. Sometimes there was, I should do it because my sponsor will be upset with me. I'm going to admit that. Like, I think that's normal in those early days. But it really early on was, oh, I don't want to do this because I'm going to be inconvenienced. So this is why I'm going to do it, so that I practice being inconvenienced. And that has been something I've grown in, and I still practice it to this day. God, how do you want me to be? The minute I'm feeling like I'm going to be inconvenienced, I know that that's what I'm putting down. It's not really about what I'm going to do. It's about surrendering that defect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I've taken notes. Do it because it gets me out of self. Thank you for going through that. We have one more anonymous question, and then we'll start wrapping this up. This comes from one of our listeners here. How do you connect to your higher power? Is this also changing in your recovery, or do you have specific things that you do?
Oh, it's always changing, always changing. I think that the what's been I didn't even know how to connect to a higher power. I still don't think I know how to connect to a higher power. I just know that I do it. Right? So all I knew was, at step 3, when my sponsor said, I want you to go read this chapter of the big book, and then I want you to go and look at these things on step 3, and then go somewhere and talk to a God of your understanding. I just did that. I can't tell you how many people I sponsor that they just won't do it. I'm like, did you do that? Well, I'm like, I just did that. I didn't know what it would affect. And when I went out that day and did what I was told to do, I did not know I would find a new God of my understanding. It was going to set me free. I did not know I was going to have a spiritual experience. So sometimes, like how I show up, it's almost like I'm trying to control the experience with God. And I have to let go of that too. So it changes all the time. It evolves. I would hope so. I think what's been helpful for me in like helping others is to just be like, think about how you would be in relationship with someone. Would you go out on a date and sit there and write during the date to communicate with them? Then put down the pen. Like, just go talk to God. Like, go on a date with God. Go for a walk and talk, right? Just like make space to like let your higher power show up without you having to figure out how it needs to be done. We have no clue. I guarantee to this day, I have no idea how to connect with God. I just know I practice it every day. And as things come to mind, I do those things. And it leads me in ways I could not have planned or prepared for.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Sheryl, for this amazing RICO 12 speaker meeting. I really appreciate your shares. Before I jump into the closing readings, do you have any final words of wisdom for us?
All I would say is if you're in here and you are struggling and you don't have somebody to take you through the steps, find somebody who has what you want and have them take you through the steps. And then, in that, don't get in your head, just do what it says. And the program is very simple. We make it complicated. Trust that this is really simple, and you will have everything I have. I have seen it again and again with the people I work with. It's for all of us.
Yeah, and I love that. And when you said, hey, find somebody who has what you want and then do what they do and do what they ask you to do. And then the next thought that came to my mind, and then go live recovery loudly so that the next people who are dying quietly can know where they can turn so that they can get what you have now. This is good stuff. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. If you have additional questions or would like to continue this conversation or would like to get in contact with Sheryl, please send me an email at rico12pod@gmail.com. That's RECO12POD@gmail.com. And I'll get you connected there with whatever you would like to connect with. Come back next week for another great speaker and Q&A session with Greg T. Greg is a first-time RICO 12 speaker, and his topic will be Step 3. And I look forward to hearing that next week. So keep updated. Get on our email list. Get in the WhatsApp group, and we'll get you so you can have all the information for all of these upcoming meetings. Let's close out here. Cheryl's going to launch us out of here with the 7th step prayer. And Cheryl, you can start that whenever you are ready.
Sure. All right. 7-step prayer for those who need to look it up. It's page 76 of the big book. Prayer. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Remember, everybody, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Keep coming back. And when you do, come all the way in, sit all the way down. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.